Now, it is unbelievable how much water evaporates. Now, when the water evaporates, it's important not to add GH to the evaporated water. You can add KH, and you can definitely add water ager, but don't add that when you're topping up evaporated water. And then you want to top the tank up so it's nice and full, but not too full. You definitely don't want it touching the lids, and you definitely don't want sealing lids. You want the water to be air to be able to get in and get across the top of the water. And in no time at all, you'll see that go down, because evaporation is unbelievable. Yeah, so these guys will breed. They're 2 female platies, and these particular platies, the variatus platies, don't really need heaters. So if it's indoors, they're usually okay. And they're gonna mix generally quite well with this range of fish. And they will drop live birth babies, which are completely formed, fully functioning babies. But in order for them to survive, you sort of need a bit of floating plant, preferably fake floating plant. I've got plenty I can give you, but you sort of just want it floating around on the surface. So when the babies come out, they sort of need somewhere that they can hide, so they get refuge away from all the other fish. Otherwise, all these hungry mouths may decide to eat them. Hey, dog. So the other thing that's quite interesting about these live-bearing tooth carp style fish is that you get a pregnant female like this one, and then she'll drop her babies, generally sort of 30 or 40 of them. And then in several months' time, it's very common that they'll drop again. So they actually don't need to have another male in order to have another batch, because they come pretty much pre-fertilized. And you can actually get several batches without a male. If you find that they stop getting fat and pregnant, obviously you can get a male. But they can basically go their life dropping sets of babies every 2 or 3 months and not even see a male. So I'm glad I'm not an obsolete male platy. Now, whenever new fish are added, it's quite a good idea not to feed the tank for a couple of days, because that gives the fish a bit of an opportunity to stabilize bacteria. It also never hurts to add good bacteria products just to speed up the bacterial growth, because what we're going to do right now is add a nice big canister filter to this tank, which will basically be like turbocharging this tank, giving it a very good biological capacity. And this filter wants to be cleaned about once a month in water from the fish tank, not water from the tap, to preserve the good bacteria. And that will allow us to carry a lot of stock in this particular aquarium, because the bigger the filter, the better. So any time you buy something new, it's really great to pull it all apart, have a look at what's going on, and put it all back together again. So inside the head of any filter is an impeller, so you want to pull that out and give it a clean a couple of times a year. And you wouldn't believe how many people buy a filter like this and then complain that it doesn't work very well. And then they bring it back to the shop, and I find that they haven't even taken the filter material out of the plastic. So my experience suggests the filter material works much better out of the plastic. So this biomedia here, which is now out of the plastic, needs to be cleaned in water from the fish tank, not water from the tap. So if you see a whole lot of crap in there, you want to just give that a bit of a clean. And then with this filter wool, you just throw out. In a perfect world, you'd replace it for polyfilter. And then if you ever have water clarity issues, then adding a bit of activated carbon to the filter will polish the water beautifully. In reference to fish growth, there are many factors, the main ones being concentrations of pheromones and phenols and other similar type chemicals in the water. Now, if you have a lot of fish and you're not changing the water very often, then you're likely to have a very high concentration of things like pheromones and phenols and things that will actually stunt growth. But if you have a very large water volume and a smaller volume of stock, and you're changing the water more often, then you're probably going to have lower levels of pheromones, phenols, and similar type chemicals that are going to stunt growth. So some of these fish can grow sort of 10 centimeters a year if in appropriate situations. But in smaller aquariums, especially that are more heavily populated, you are not going to get that sort of growth. They are not going to grow so fast, and they are not going to grow so big. So obviously the smaller species of fish are going to grow slower. The larger species of fish are going to grow faster, and that's going to be governed by how much room they have and what the water change situation is. So a big filter and media like poly filter are definitely going to help, but the size of the volume of the water and the size of the filtration and the amount of the water changes and the quality of the food are all factors. So now what we're doing is priming the filter. So this filter must be full of water before you turn it on. And you need to give the filter about a month before it really starts to work, because what happens is good bacteria needs to grow in the filter, and that process will take time. So now that that's full, I can plug it in and turn it on. Look how much water it took out of the tank. It's like 1/10 of the water volume. So I've taken the spray bar off this filter because I hate spray bars. They're ugly and they restrict the flow for nothing. So this filter is just returning water at the surface now and giving a good agitation. And the canister is shooting out and agitating the surface, which is great for agitation, because it's really important to remember that all filters grow bacteria, and the bacteria sucks the oxygen out of the water. So when the filter pumps, you really want it ruffling the surface, because that's a process of re-oxygenation. The other thing that I'd consider doing too is get a flipper. A flipper is like a magnet cleaner with a blade on it, because it will make cleaning all this really easy. Without the blade, cleaning this is like a pain in the ass, whereas a flipper is a little magnet cleaner, and the magnet cleaner with the little blade will give this a clean in 2 seconds flat. So the platies appear to be settling in very well. Anytime you do get new fish, particularly in cold water aquariums, you want to keep an eye on white spot. Now, white spot is when the fish get little white dots on them. You'll often see them breathing heavily, and you'll often see flicking and scratching. If your fish look like they're itchy, then that usually means they have itch or white spot. And if that's the case, you want to bring a water sample and a video down to the shop straight away, and you want to get some white spot cure. And white spot cure is quite a good thing to have on hand. There is some here already, I have seen it. Because white spot cure is one of those things that if you do see white spot, if you treat it really quickly, then it doesn't tend to be a problem because it's very effective, the medications. But if you let it get worse and worse and you don't treat it, then you can actually lose fish. And that's another reason why bringing a water sample to the shop every now and then is a great idea, because we can check the water, and if you bring us a video of the tank running, one of the things we'll be looking for is the way the fish are swimming around. And if the fish are swimming around comfortably in the water column and they're not breathing heavily and they're not flicking and scratching or swimming erratically, then we're happy. But if we see heavy breathing, erratic swimming, flicking and scratching, then we know there's a problem, and we know there's something we need to solve very quickly. So we've done a bit of a water change on this tank, and we've added this big canister filter. So it's going to be a good idea in the couple of weeks, to bring a water sample down to the shop, and we can just check on ammonia nitrite, nitrate, KH, GH, and pH. They're sort of the main things we'll be looking at. It's also good to know your temperature, so it never hurts to have a thermometer in the tank. Most of these fish are going to be happy enough inside without a heater, but it's still nice to know what the temperature is. And then it's very important to be aware of what's called biological capacity. Now, biological capacity is basically Mother Nature says you are allowed a certain amount of fish in this certain environment with that certain amount of maintenance. And if you exceed Mother Nature's capacity, then some of your fish will die. They'll either one at a time drop off for what will appear to you to be no apparent reason, or she might send a disease which wipes out a few of them. But balance is what she is all about. And if you do not respect her balance, she will not respect your fish. So what you need to be aware of in a tank like this is that for now, this tank is going to be quite good, governed by the new filter. Now, previously this tank has experienced some problems, and that would be due to limited biological capacity because it had some filters that were relatively small and the bacteria really wasn't being handled properly in reference to cleaning with tank water, not tap water, and replacing sponges and so forth. So the bacteria really wasn't being harboured. There was also a fair bit of crap in the gravel, but now with this new big filter, this filter will easily handle this load of fish. But what you need to be aware of is that biological capacity is a current snapshot. And over time, particularly with carp in the tank, is the fish are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then as the fish get bigger, they will eventually exceed biological capacity, whether you like it or not. They may do it because they've grown so much. They may do it because you're not looking after them properly. Or they may do it because they breed. And as they breed or as they grow, then there will come a day when your biological capacity is exceeded. When the biological capacity is exceeded, then some fish have to die. That's just what happens. So you can either reduce the fish, maybe remove some of the bigger ones if they're getting too big for the tank, or you can up your maintenance. More water changes, bigger filters are going to buy you more capacity. But regardless of what your capacity is, particularly with fish like this in your tank, which are capable of growing the size of this tank, you are going to eventually breach your capacity. So that's just something you need to be aware of as your fish grow. The other thing to be aware of is that the large fish are disproportionately, they require disproportionately more biological capacity than small fish. Small fish are very economical, so with their waste output. So you can have lots of little fish, no problem, but the big fish you can have very few. Because if you have 1 kilogram of big fish, that is apparently equivalent to 20 kilograms of small fish, or some ratio which is completely disproportionate like that. So you cannot have many big fish, you can have lots of small fish because small fish are more economical. So getting rid of a big fish will make way for many small fish. So with your live bearers, such as this fella, if you look underneath them, the females have a fin, whereas the males have got a little dingo doodah. So they're very easy to tell the difference just by looking underneath them. With any of your live bearing species, if you see a fin at the bottom, they're a female. If you see a little thingy, then it's a male. Now here at Majestic Aquariums, we're ridding our plastic shopping bags, going for the eco choice. So if you want to be one of the cool kids and take your fish home, you can get a Majestic Aquariums reusable shopping bag for $2.99.